Hi everybody, welcome back to the BizTech Academy as we delve into Tulip Mania, a pivotal chapter in economic history from the Dutch Golden Age. I'm Steve and today we're going to unravel the story of what is often referred to as the first ever recorded economic bubble. Before we begin, however, it's crucial to acknowledge that Tulip Mania occurred almost 400 years ago and therefore there is some uncertainty about the true facts of the event. Did this financial turmoil affect 80% of the Dutch population, as some suggest, or was its impact confined to just a few reckless gamblers in the taverns of old Amsterdam? The real truth may well remain elusive, but does this really matter? Well, the actual extent of Tulip Mania may not be as important as the lessons it teaches us about economic bubbles, and it's this that I'm going to focus on in this video, as well as how Dutch society reacted to the aftermath of this dramatic event. To fully understand Tulip Mania, however, we must first set the scene and take a closer look at what life was like in 17th century Netherlands. Tulip Mania took place in the early 17th century, precisely during the Dutch Golden Age, a period marked by immense wealth and a cultural revolution in the Netherlands. The Dutch Republic had become a powerhouse in international trade and finance, boasting immense wealth from its successful ventures across the globe. Optimism and a sense of invincibility was rife amongst the Dutch, and in 1634 the shoots of what became Tulip Mania began to grow, gaining momentum until it reached its zenith in February of 1637. At its core, Tulip Mania wasn't just about the tulips themselves. It symbolised a feverish engagement in speculative trading, promising extraordinary but ultimately unsustainable returns. People from all walks of life, rich and poor, eagerly participated, investing their fortunes in tulips and driving prices to astronomical levels. It's one of the earliest documented examples of market speculation, offering a first-hand glimpse into the psychology of speculative bubbles. Tulip Mania serves as a historical example, illustrating how group behaviour and herd mentality can lead ordinary individuals to disconnect from rational thinking, fueling unsustainable market trends. And to understand how, and more importantly why this happened, we need to delve deeper into the Dutch Golden Age. The Dutch Golden Age was a period of unparalleled prosperity and cultural achievement. It spanned much of the 17th century, and during this era, the Netherlands underwent significant changes both economically and socially that would shape its trajectory as a global commercial powerhouse. Economically, the Dutch Republic was on the rise, establishing itself as a leading commercial force through its extensive maritime trade networks. The Dutch were skilled merchants and seafarers dominating trade routes from the Baltic Sea to the Far East and the Americas. And this economic prowess was supported by innovations like the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, which facilitated investment in companies like the Dutch East India Company, helping create a modern financial system. Socially, the Dutch Republic saw significant urbanization and social mobility, with cities like Amsterdam becoming hubs of wealth and opportunity. And this urban growth fueled a cultural renaissance characterized by a flourishing arts and intellectual life, with painters like Rembrandt van Rijn and Johannes Vermeer producing masterpieces that captured the essence of Dutch life. Religious tolerance also played a role, attracting skilled migrants and fostering a climate of innovation and diversity. In summary, the economic and social conditions of early 17th century Netherlands created a fertile ground for economic innovation and speculation. But the big question is, why tulips? The ascent of tulips to cultural significance was a fascinating phenomenon, and it mirrored the theme of wealth and social aspiration in Dutch society. As Netherlands culture transformed in the early part of the 17th century, tulips became coveted possessions among the Dutch elite, representing affluence, sophistication, and a refined taste. Their presence in art and festivities further solidified their cultural importance, with elaborate arrangements and vibrant displays. Dutch artists immortalised tulips in their paintings, depicting them as symbols of personal wealth and cultural refinement. Tulip breeding further enhanced their allure, producing rare varieties with striking patterns that were highly sought after. And this rarity, combined with vibrant colours and unique patterns, made their coveted possessions akin to owning exquisite artwork or precious jewellery. The economic impact was profound, with, as we will see, speculators driving prices to unprecedented levels during the height of Tulip Mania. At its peak, the price of a single tulip bulb could rival that of a luxurious Amsterdam canal house. In summary, tulips in the Dutch Golden Age were more than just flowers. They were symbols of economic power, social status, and cultural achievement. Moreover, tulips in the Netherlands in the 17th century illustrate how cultural perceptions and desires can shape economic values. And with this in mind, let's have a look at the rise of Tulip Mania and explore its timeline from initial speculation in 1634 to the bubble bursting in 1637. In early 1634, interest in tulips, which had been building steadily, began to spread beyond florists and botanists to the general public. Wealthy merchants and members of the aristocracy in particular started to see tulip bulbs as valuable commodities. By mid 1634, as tulips became increasingly fashionable among the wealthy, demand for rare bulbs increased, and this demand began to attract speculators who saw an opportunity to profit from the tulip trade. Throughout 1635, the market for tulips expanded dramatically. Prices began to rise as speculators entered the market in greater numbers, transactions became more frequent, and tulips were increasingly bought not for their beauty, but as investments. And then, by late 1635, the first futures contracts were introduced to the tulip market. Buyers began to purchase tulips at a certain price at a future date, further inflating prices and increasing speculative trading. 1636 was the peak of speculation, with tulip prices reaching unprecedented levels in the early part of the year. Rare bulbs were reportedly selling for the equivalent of what a skilled craftsman might earn in a year. And by mid 1636, the market became frenzied, with bulbs being traded multiple times in a single day. Tulip bulbs, which were not even available during the growing season since they were still in the ground, were bought and sold as mere promises on paper. And this was all exacerbated by the market being highly leveraged, with many participants investing money borrowed against future gains. Speculation had expanded beyond the wealthy and the educated to include ordinary citizens, many of whom had staked their livelihoods on the tulip trade. And by late 1636, the trading of tulips was no longer confined to professional traders or florists. Everyone, from cobblers to carpenters, were caught up in the tulip trade, with many trades being done of an evening in the local tavern. And this inevitably led to a highly volatile market. Then, during the first week of 1637, tulip prices reached their zenith, with numerous examples of astronomical prices being paid for rare tulip bulbs. A Semper Augustus, famed for its red and white stripes, reached unprecedented prices of 10,000 guilders, enough to buy a luxurious house in Amsterdam and live lavishly without working. A Viceroy tulip with purple, red, and white flames was traded for a basket of goods valued at 2,500 guilders, including livestock, wine, and commodities. And a blue Gouda bulb, famed for its rare blue colouring, fetched 1,200 guilders, a sum that could purchase acres of productive farmland. And a copper Admiral bulb sold for 3,000 guilders, a sum that could sponsor a luxurious ocean voyage for two aboard a Dutch East India ship. These stories reflect the madness of tulip mania, where tulip bulbs were valued not for their intrinsic worth, but as speculative bets on their future value. And of course, this couldn't last, so as we experienced the rise of the tulip, we inevitably also experienced the fall of the tulip. The critical turning point came in February of 1637 at a routine bulb auction in Holland, which was expected to attract a large number of buyers and high prices. However, to the shock of traders and speculators, buyers were markedly fewer, and the enthusiasm that had fueled the market rise was noticeably absent. The prices of bulbs, which had soared to unprecedented levels, now received bids nowhere near their expected value. And this lack of interest at the Harlem auction sent a ripple of panic through the market. Speculators began to realize that the high prices were unsustainable and that there might not always be a buyer willing to pay more for the bulb than they had. And this loss of confidence led to a rush to sell, which quickly escalated as more people feared being left holding worthless bulbs. As news of the failed auction spread further, tulip holders across the country hurried to liquidate their holdings, leading to a sharp fall in prices. The market, which was buoyed on the belief of ever increasing prices, was now collapsing on the reality that tulips were being overvalued. In the aftermath of the sudden decline, local governments attempted to step in and stabilise the situation by offering to honour contracts at 10% of their face value as a means of providing some restitution to holders. However, this measure failed to restore confidence in the market, with many contracts being deemed null and void, leading to legal disputes and financial ruin for many involved. The collapse in the tulip market left many investors bankrupt, particularly those who had entered the market in its latter stages and had invested heavily at inflated prices. And unfortunately, the tulip market never recovered to its speculative heights, and the fallout from tulip mania spread throughout the Netherlands. The fallout was immediate and for some severe, impacting an array of individuals, from wealthy merchants to modest craftsmen, all hoping to gain from the tulip trade. And as with all such things, it was the less educated or slower off the mark that were hit the worst, with many speculators who entered the tulip market at its peak suffering the harshest consequences. As tulip prices plummeted, these investors were left holding bulbs that had lost nearly all of their speculative value overnight, and without a means to recoup their investments, many faced bankruptcy and financial ruin. There were also credit and debt issues. The bubble had been largely fueled by credit, with many transactions not conducted in cash but through credit extensions. And with the collapse, creditors and banks faced a surge in defaults on loans issued for buying tulips, which strained the financial institutions and tightened credit for other economic activities. Many middle-class families found the allure of quick wealth led them to invest their life savings or take on substantial debt to invest in tulips. And the bubble bursting erased significant portions of family wealth and savings, leaving little for other investments or even in many cases for basic sustenance. And of course, there were also non-financial impacts on both individual investors and the wider community. For many, there was a loss of social status. In the tightly knit communities of 17th century Netherlands, bankruptcy or financial insolvency could lead to a severe loss of social standing and credibility. For many merchants and traders whose reputation is essential to business, this led to social ostracization and personal crisis. There were also legal and social disputes as buyers and sellers sought to escape or enforce contracts made at the height of the mania. These disputes often tore communities apart, sowing distrust among neighbours and within trade circles. And then there were the psychological effects, which were profound for many who discovered they'd lost their fortunes overnight. Many investors experienced extreme stress due to their financial losses, which affected their health and family stability. The collective mood in many communities throughout the Netherlands shifted from one of optimistic speculation to caution and anxiety, and in many cases, this was overnight. But in addition to this, there was a wider impact, an impact on the general populace. Economic uncertainty was felt across the whole country for many years after the bubble burst. Even those who had not participated directly in the tulip trade felt the effects of the aftermath of Tulip Mania. The economic uncertainty and tightening of credit affected small businesses and artisans by reducing the amount of disposable income circulating in the economy. And this all led to a shift in economic policies regarding speculative trading within the Dutch Republic and spurred a series of legal and economic reforms. These reforms are aimed at stabilising the economy, preventing similar financial crises in the future, and also restoring confidence in the country's legal and financial systems. And these key changes included the clarification and enforcement of contract law. In the immediate wake of the crisis, there was considerable legal confusion about the enforceability of contracts signed during the height of the mania, particularly those involving futures contracts. And the Dutch government intervened to declare that such contracts could be nullified if they were deemed speculative and not backed by actual delivery of goods, in this case tulips. This decision helped prevent widespread bankruptcy amongst the populace who had signed contracts they could no longer fulfill. And there was also the standardisation of contracts, with the government placing stricter controls on the creation and enforcement of futures contracts, requiring clearer terms and better defined conditions to ensure that both parties understood the risks involved. And then there was the regulation of commodity exchanges themselves, with the introduction of the supervision of trade practices. The tulip bulb market had operated with little to no oversight, leading to rampant speculation and fraudulent practices. In response, the Dutch authorities began to supervise and regulate commodity exchanges more closely, setting standards for fair trading practices and monitoring compliance to protect traders and investors alike. And there was also the introduction of transparency requirements, with markets required to maintain more transparent operations, including the publication of prices and the registration of traders. The crisis had also highlighted the dangers of excessive speculation driven by easy credit. And in response, the government implemented stricter regulations on lending practices, particularly concerning speculative investments. Lenders were required to perform more rigorous assessments on the borrower's ability to repay before extending credit for investments in commodities like tulips. This was the start of what we know as KYC, or Know Your Customer. And finally, there was an ongoing scheme of public awareness and education, with the introduction of consumer protection laws safeguarding buyers from market manipulation and unfair trading practices. And there was also a public education program introduced that was brought about after the government recognised that a well-informed public could better navigate the complexities of the financial markets. These reforms helped to lay the groundwork for a more stable and regulated financial environment in the Netherlands. They also served as early examples of government intervention into financial markets to prevent market speculation and also to promote market stability. The legal and economic changes that were instigated after Tulip Mania's collapse had a long-lasting effect on Dutch society, embedding a cautious approach to financial speculation that lasted through the centuries. And this takes us to the positive impacts of the Tulip Mania legacy. In summary, the collapse of Tulip Mania in 1637, whilst initially disruptive, had some major impacts on Dutch society, Dutch economy, and the tulip industry itself. These impacts were not only economic but also cultural and regulatory, and they shaped the trajectory of Dutch commercial practices away from speculative investments, and ultimately the Dutch economy proved resilient and it grew. Regulations were tightened and there was a shift in investment practices. Tulip Mania and its aftermath led to a more cautious approach to investments amongst the Dutch. And there was a notable shift towards more conservative investment strategies and longer-term growth more than short-term speculative gains. And this shift helped foster a culture of prudent financial management amongst both businesses and private investors. And furthermore, there was a far-reaching impact on the tulip industry itself, starting with the normalization of the tulip market. Following the collapse, the tulip industry returned to a more sustainable model. Prices stabilized at levels that reflected the intrinsic value of the tulips rather than a speculative hype. And this normalization helped the tulip industry mature into a stable and economically significant sector within Dutch horticulture that exists today. There has also been innovation and global appeal, with the Netherlands continuing to lead tulip cultivation, focusing on breeding techniques that produce a wide variety of tulip types, enhancing both their aesthetic value and their appeal in global markets. Today, the Netherlands remains synonymous with tulips, and the flower is a significant export commodity and a major tourist attraction, especially during the annual tulip season. And there is also the cultural legacy. Tulips have become embedded in Dutch culture, symbolising not only the beauty of nature, but also serving as a reminder of the dangers of economic excess. The tulip remains a national symbol of the Netherlands, celebrated in festivals, gardens, and public spaces across the country. The Tulip Mania episode left a lasting cultural imprint on the Dutch, often cited in discussions about economic prudence and the risks associated with speculative bubbles. It serves as a historical case study in schools and universities and is frequently referenced in financial literature as an early example of an economic bubble. In conclusion, therefore, the long-term impact of Tulip Mania on both the Dutch economy and the tulip industry is both profound and multifaceted. While it brought about temporary reduction, it also led to significant change in regulation and financial controls throughout the Netherlands, and this led to a culture of financial sobriety, which has followed throughout the centuries. And ultimately, the tulip industry, once a symbol of speculative excess, transformed into a stable and enduring part of the Dutch economic landscape, contributing to the country's identity and its economic diversity. And with that, I shall bid you farewell. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share this video. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.